ticket. James Cox for president, FDR for vice president. FDR might have been a candidate for the presidency in 1924, but that golden dream dimmed when he was crippled by polio. Now he wore 10-pound metal leg braces and spent months of every year paddling around at Warm Springs, a derelict health resort he'd bought in Georgia. The boys in the AP newsroom, usually pretty good judges of character, wrote him off as a well-heeled dilettante who had a boatload of charm, but lacked the political muscle to steer the ship. But Roosevelt was Al Smith's fair-haired boy and a Tammany Hall candidate, which made him very interesting copy, especially when you added in the connections to TR and the Oyster Bay Republican Roosevelts. So I spent my days loitering in the lobby at the Democratic Party headquarters in the General Motors building at Broadway and 57th, picking through the flotsam and jetsam of corridor gossip. And the more I heard, the more my gut told me that the story behind this story was the candidate's wife, who was doing something political wives just didn't do. She was campaigning for the ticket, openly, with enthusiasm, which all by itself was news. In Albany, Mrs. Al Smith hid behind her tea table in the governor's mansion and was off limits to the press. In Washington, Mrs. Calvin Coolidge, formerly a teacher in a school for the deaf, had been ordered by her husband not to talk to reporters. Urged to speak at a press luncheon, the story went, she had resorted to sign language, a perfect metaphor for muzzled political wives who were told to smile and keep their mouths shut. Mrs. Roosevelt was an anomaly, and as a reporter, I loved anomalies, especially when the anomaly was a woman doing something that made her stand out as something other than a wife, a mother, and a clothes horse. This woman went out on the campaign trail, edited the Women's Democratic News, wrote magazine articles on women in politics, taught at an exclusive girls' school, and, with two friends, owned a furniture factory on the Roosevelt estate. A furniture factory? Now there was an anomaly for you. But she had a conventional side as well. She was the mother of 4 boys and a girl, grown or away at school, and a grandmother. It had been my experience that the fastest way to a candidate was through the candidate's secretary. In this case, the candidate's wife had a secretary, Malvina Thompson, so I knocked on her door and invited her for a late afternoon coffee and sweet. We met at Viniero's on East 11th between 1st and 2nd Avenue, over a slice of Italian cheesecake for her and a Napoleon for me. I knew even then that I was diabetic, but didn't quite believe it. Yet. I had stumbled onto Viniero's a decade before, during a short-lived stint on the old New York Tribune, during the uneasy days before the United States entered the war in 1917. I had come to the Tribune from the Milwaukee Sentinel, fired with the hope of getting credentialed as a foreign war correspondent and heading for France and the front. That's where the action was. That's where I wanted to be. But the Trib editor laughed at me when I told him what I wanted to do. "Just who the hell do you think you are?" he demanded, loud enough to be heard across the newsroom. "Stick to your knitting, girlie. Females don't cover wars." Laughter stuttered from one typewriter to another as the reporters, male to a man, shared the joke. In my anger at yet more evidence of bias against female journalists, I spouted off to the editor and got the boot for insubordination. But I had found Viniero's. When I returned to the Minneapolis Tribune, I missed its Napoleons. Now, a decade later, I was glad to be back. Malvina Thompson was a dark-haired, firm-jawed woman in her mid-30s, well-informed and politically savvy. By the time our order appeared, we were Tommy and Hick, trading Tammany Hall gossip and shaking our heads over Mayor Jimmy Walker's latest grubby, greed-stained scandal. I asked a few wary questions about what was going on at Democratic headquarters, using her answers like channel markers, showing whether she'd give me access.